By 9:23 a.m., Flight 472 had reached 36,000 feet, cruising smoothly toward San Francisco. Coffee cups clinked on tray tables. A child giggled somewhere in the back. The seatbelt sign was off. Emily was dreaming, a soft, wordless dream of waves on a quiet beach, when a subtle tremor rippled through the plane. It was faint, barely noticeable, like a passing bump on a country road. She didn't wake, but Robert noticed. His trained ear caught the difference in tone, a subtle change in engine pitch. He looked out the window. The wing flexed slightly, normal, but the left engine's outer casing seemed to shimmer oddly in the sunlight. Like heat distortion, he frowned a few rows behind. A flight attendant named Rachel was pushing a beverage cart when the tremor came again. Stronger this time, followed by a strange metallic vibration that made cups rattle. Passengers looked up, curious but calm. Then it stopped. Rachel forced a reassuring smile. "Just turbulence, folks," she said. "Nothing to worry about." She didn't believe it herself. The captain's first announcement, the intercom clicked. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor technical issue with one of our engine sensors. Everything is under control. Please remain seated while we run a quick diagnostic." The captain's voice was calm, practiced. Yet the pause between his words was just a little too long. Emily stirred awake. "What happened?" she asked softly. Robert shook his head. "Probably nothing. Just sensors." But even as he said it, he could feel something was off. Outside, the horizon stretched endlessly blue, yet to the trained eye, the left engine's exhaust trail flickered irregularly, almost pulsing. Inside the cockpit, in the flight deck, Captain Mark Reynolds, 47, and First Officer Jacob Lynn, 42, stared at the warning panel. One of the engine temperature lights had begun to flash amber. "Left engine EGT rising," Jacob said, frowning. "Climbing fast." Mark's hand moved automatically, throttling back the left engine slightly. "Let's stabilize it. Pull power to 65%. The temperature reading steadied for a moment, then spiked again. Red this time. Jacob cursed under his breath. "That's not a sensor error," Mark nodded grimly. "No, that's real." He reached for the radio. "Seattle Center, this is Flight 472, experiencing an abnormal rise in left engine temperature. Requesting descent to FL 280 and vectors for nearest suitable airport." The reply came within seconds. "Copy that, Flight 472. You're cleared to descend to flight level 280. Nearest airport is Portland International." Mark exhaled slowly. "All right, let's take her down." Tension in the cabin. Passengers felt the descent almost immediately. A soft drop, the kind that makes stomachs tighten slightly. The engines changed pitch. The attendants exchanged glances. Emily rubbed her eyes. "Are we landing early?" Robert looked up from his window. "We're descending, but not for landing, I think." Rachel came by again, smiling too brightly. "Just a minor detour, folks. Everything's fine." But her hands were trembling. At 28,000 feet, the vibration returned, louder this time. A deep shudder rippled through the left side of the aircraft. A metallic bang echoed faintly, followed by the unmistakable smell of something burning. Passengers gasped. Someone screamed, the desperate announcement. The intercom clicked again. This time, the captain's voice was sharper, urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, please listen carefully. We are experiencing an engine malfunction. The left engine has been shut down. We are diverting to Portland immediately. Cabin crew, prepare for emergency landing procedures." A collective silence filled the plane, heavy, breathless. Emily felt her chest tighten. Her nurse instincts kicked in, adrenaline flooding her veins. She looked around. People were gripping armrests, praying, crying softly. Robert's face was pale but composed. "We'll be fine," he murmured, almost to himself. These birds can fly on one engine, but his eyes betrayed what he knew. The odds weren't perfect. The plane trembled again, harder this time. Cups fell. A child began to cry. Rachel's voice came through the cabin, steady but cracking slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, heads down when instructed. Remove sharp objects. Tighten seatbelts." Emily swallowed hard. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She looked out the window. The left engine was dark now, motionless. A faint wisp of smoke trailing behind. Then, whoa, a flash. A burst of orange flame flared briefly before disappearing. The engine cowling peeled slightly outward. Gasps erupted through the cabin. Someone shouted, "Fire!" Rachel's face went white. She ran toward the intercom. "Captain, visible flame left engine." Inside the cockpit, the critical minutes mark's heart pounded as he heard Rachel's call. "Confirm firelight?" he barked. Jacob looked down. "Firelight on." Mark didn't hesitate. "Engine 1 fire handle. Pull." Jacob pulled. The alarm screamed in the cockpit, a harsh rising tone. Bottle 1 discharge. Bottle 2 armed. Seconds felt like minutes. The firelight flickered, then went out. "Firelight out," Jacob said quietly. Mark nodded, exhaling shakily. "Okay, engines secured. 1 engine left. Let's keep her steady." But they were losing altitude faster than planned. The drag from the damaged engine was heavier than expected. "Speed's dropping," Jacob warned. "We're at 220 knots and bleeding." Mark's mind raced. "Keep it above minimum control. Flaps 0. We can't risk asymmetry." He keyed the intercom again, voice low but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have contained a fire in 1 engine. We are now flying safely on 1 engine and making a precautionary landing. Please stay calm and follow crew instructions." In seat 8, Emily gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mind spun. She thought of her parents, of her little brother who loved airplanes, of the patients she had cared for in Alaska. She whispered under her breath, "Please, just let us make it." Beside her, Robert kept his composure. "We'll make it," he said again. "The 737's built for this." He glanced at her and smiled faintly. "You know what the safest part of the plane is?" Emily shook her head. "Right where you're sitting," he said. Over the wing, outside her window, the Pacific Northwest stretched endlessly. Forested mountains, winding rivers, the faint shimmer of the Columbia River far below. Approach to Portland, the descent of fear, Portland Tower. Flight 472, engine 1 failure, single engine operation. Request emergency landing runway 28 right. Flight 472 cleared for priority landing. Emergency crews standing by. The captain looked ahead. The airport was visible now, a faint silver strip in the distance. "Gear down," he ordered. "Gear down," Jacob confirmed. The rumble of hydraulics echoed faintly. The right engine strained, pushing the aircraft towards safety. Inside, the cabin lights flickered once. Oxygen masks dropped, just for a moment, then retracted again as power stabilized. People screamed. Rachel moved quickly, shouting, "Stay calm! Keep your heads down!" Emily looked out one last time. Fire trucks were visible below, their red lights flashing. And then, just as the runway came into view, the plane lurched violently left. The left wing dipped. Too far. Alarms blared in the cockpit. "Stall warning." Mark pulled the yoke hard right, shouting, "Hold it! Hold it!" The plane leveled, and barely. Inside, Emily clutched Robert's arm. He whispered, "Almost there." Her heart pounded in sync with the engine's desperate roar. The runway lights grew larger, brighter, seconds away. Then over the intercom, the captain's voice, hoarse and raw, came through. "Brace for impact." Brace for impact. The words tore through the cabin like a thunderclap. Every passenger bent forward, heads between knees, arms locked around the seat in front. The cabin filled with cries, prayers, and the sound of rattling luggage from the overhead bins. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart hammered like it wanted to escape her chest. She could feel the vibrations of the single remaining engine, straining beyond its limits. Robert kept one hand braced against the window, whispering softly, "Hold it steady. Come on, hold it steady." The aircraft shook violently, a bone-deep tremor as it cut through the final layer of air before touchdown. The screech of metal echoed faintly, the landing gear locking in place, and then impact. A deafening boom reverberated through the fuselage as the wheels struck the runway. The plane bounced once, twice, then slammed down hard. Oxygen masks swung like pendulums. Sparks flew from the left landing gear as the damaged wing scraped the runway's edge. "Reverse thrust," Mark shouted in the cockpit. "Right engine only," Jacob called back, his hand slamming the lever forward. The plane roared, shuddered, and began to slow. The runway lights blurred into streaks, but something was wrong. "Hydraulics failing," Jacob said. "No brakes on the left. Deploy spoilers manually." Mark barked. The jet veered slightly left, toward the grass. Mark fought the controls, his knuckles white. The passengers screamed as the plane tilted, then thudded back onto the tarmac. Tires burst. The smell of burning rubber filled the cabin, and then, finally, silence. A long, trembling silence broken only by the distant sound of sirens racing toward them. The plane came to a stop, tilted slightly to one side. Smoke curled from the left wing. "Evacuate," Rachel shouted. "Evacuate! Leave everything behind!" Evacuation. The line between fear and relief, the cabin erupted into chaos. Passengers unbuckled, tripping over seats and bags. The flight attendant shouted commands. "Go! Go, jump and slide." Emily grabbed Robert's arm. "Can you move?" He nodded weakly, but his leg was bleeding. A deep cut from flying debris. "Come on," she said, slipping under his arm, helping him down the aisle. The acrid smoke burned her throat. Alarms wailed. The emergency door at row 7 burst open with a hiss. Rachel kicked it free. The evacuation slide deployed on a bright yellow lifeline against gray smoke. "Go, go," she screamed. Emily pushed Robert ahead. He slid down, disappearing into a crowd of flashing red lights and firefighters. When it was her turn, she hesitated, turning back for 1 second. Rows of seats, twisted, smoke-stained, and people still trying to climb out. A mother clutching her baby. A teenager frozen in terror. Emily turned back, re-entering the cabin. Come on!" she shouted, pulling the girl toward the slide. Behind her, a flight attendant yelled, "Get out! It's spreading!" Emily pushed the girl onto the slide, then followed. Cold air hit her face like salvation. The moment her feet touched the ground, she fell to her knees, coughing. Firefighters swarmed around the aircraft, spraying foam over the smoldering engine. Paramedics guided passengers away, wrapping blankets around trembling shoulders. Emily looked back. The left wing was scorched, metal warped and blackened. And then she saw Robert, sitting on a stretcher, oxygen mask over his face, but alive. He raised a shaky hand and gave her a thumbs up. She smiled weakly. "Told you we'd make it," he mouthed. Aftermath. The longest silence within 30 minutes, all 178 passengers were accounted for. 2 were seriously injured. Most others had minor cuts and bruises, but no one died. Captain Mark Reynolds stood near the aircraft, still in his uniform, his face pale with exhaustion. Investigators surrounded him, but for a brief moment, he simply looked at his plane, the machine that had barely held together. When the NTSB officer approached, he only said one thing: "She brought us home." Inside an ambulance, Emily sat with a blanket around her shoulders. Her hand still trembled, though she barely noticed. A paramedic cleaned a small cut on her forehead. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked gently. She nodded. "I think so." But her eyes kept drifting to the horizon, the runway where she had almost died. 2 days later, the investigation, the headlines dominated the news. Miracle in Portland. Engine fire forces emergency landing. All survive. Experts praised the crew's professionalism and the passengers' composure. But behind the media glow, investigators were digging deep. The cause, they discovered, was not simple. Inside the charred remains of the left engine, technicians found a fractured turbine blade, metal fatigue. But something else caught their attention. A loose bolt wedged inside the cowling near the locking pin assembly. It wasn't from the engine. It was from the canopy of a maintenance lift used the night before. Someone had dropped it unnoticed, and it had been sucked in during pre-flight testing, a 1 in a million accident. And yet, it almost cost 178 lives. When investigators interviewed Captain Reynolds, he admitted something quietly. "I thought we were gone. I'd never seen a fire spread that fast." Then he added, voice trembling, "But there was a calm in the cabin. I saw it when I looked back. A woman helping others. She was in 8A. The interview, the woman in 8A 2 days later. Reporters found Emily in the hospital cafeteria, sitting by a window with a cup of untouched coffee. They asked her how she stayed calm, why she helped others when she could have run. She smiled faintly. "I wasn't calm. I was terrified. But I thought, if this is my last few minutes, I don't want to be afraid. I want to help." One reporter asked, "What went through your mind when the captain said brace for impact?" She looked out the window. "My little brother," she said softly. "He loves planes. I promised him I'd bring him a model from Alaska." A pause. "I still have it in my bag." Somehow it made it. The captain's visit that evening, Captain Reynolds visited the hospital. His uniform was neatly pressed, but his eyes carried the weight of those minutes. He found Emily sitting by the window again. "Miss Carter?" he said gently. She turned, startled, then smiled. "Captain, I just wanted to thank you," he said. "The crew told me what you did. You helped people get out when others froze." "I only did what anyone would have done," she replied. He shook his head. "No, not everyone does." He hesitated, then said quietly, "When the left engine blew, I didn't think we'd touch down in one piece. You gave them courage whether you knew it or not." Emily looked down, a faint smile touching her lips. "I just didn't want anyone to be alone." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You weren't." They stood in silence for a long moment, the pilot who refused to give up and the passenger who refused to be afraid. Months later, the flight that changed everything, by spring, the incident had been filed under a rare classification: uncontained engine failure with successful single-engine recovery. Aviation schools began studying Captain Reynolds's flight transcript. The NTSB report credited his quick response for saving the aircraft. But inside the cockpit voice recorder, a single line stood out. At 9:58 a.m., moments before the fire was extinguished, the captain's voice could be heard muttering, "We've got souls back there. We're bringing them home." Emily returned to work months later. She still flew sometimes, always sitting by the window. Always in seat 8A when she could, not out of superstition, but as a quiet promise to herself. Epilogue. The woman in 8A every year, on the anniversary of Flight 472, survivors sent messages to each other in a small online group. Some shared photos of their families. Others wrote short notes of gratitude, and every year Emily posted the same thing. "To Captain Reynolds, Rachel, Robert, and everyone on 472, we made it home. Thank you." One evening she received a letter, handwritten, stamped with an aviation emblem. It was from the captain. "Dear Emily, there are flights you forget, and there are flights that never leave you. Two will stay with me forever. Because of the calm in 8A, you reminded me that courage isn't in the cockpit alone. Sometimes it's by the window seat whispering a prayer for everyone else. Captain Mark Reynolds." Emily read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and looked out the window. Outside, a plane ascended into the sunset, silver wings catching the last light. She smiled softly and whispered, "Safe flight." The sky swallowed the sound, quiet, endless, and free.